Hey everybody, it's Ken and Danille.
Hello.
And I'm very excited to have Jeremy and Heather Scott. Welcome.
Thank you, guys.
So we wanted to have you guys on. First of all, we were on yours, but also these are two very, very strong entrepreneurs locally. I've been a client. Danille was a client for 6 years.
Yeah, a long time. Yep.
But I really want to get into a few things today. So they have a huge online presence, a lot of courses, and incredible podcasts, incredible following. They used all of their business to buy their own building. So let's talk about your journey.
Yeah, I had graduated college. It's kind of like around 07, 08 when the world's melting down, if you will. I had no direction, honestly. And I had a couple buddies living here, gave me a call, and they're like, hey, man, you should move to Phoenix, Scottsdale. And so probably like net worth was like negative 2,000. It was kind of where I was at when I landed here. And Heather, not that different for me at that time.
But I had no money to my name. I was in student loan debt and credit card debt. We were a match made in heaven.
Yeah, I mean, most young people, like, it's kind of like, hey, I was broke when I was younger. Like, we kind of all were.
Yeah.
You know? And it's, can you evolve from that point, which is the tough part.
Yeah, because, I think everyone sees where people are now, and they just assume that they could never be there.
I actually believe that not coming from money was an advantage for me.
Yeah, it's like a superpower, really. I mean, because you do all these things out of necessity because there's no safety net. Like, no one is coming to bail us out or do anything. So everything we had to do to get to this point, and you appreciate it more. It's kind of like when you look at, like, let's say, like lottery winners. A lot of them have pretty sad stories at the end of it because it's like all of a sudden you go from zero to 20 million bucks. But you have to become a different person along the way to like manage that much money and handle it. And as you go through this progression, that's kind of what we have felt. And growing up rougher is probably like one of the greatest gifts. It sucks when you're in it for sure, but on the back end, it's awesome.
And you wonder why a lottery winner or an athlete that gets this big contract, doesn't have the money at the end. It's because they don't have the discipline, right?
Yeah, we wouldn't have been like if someone would have gave me $100,000 at 22, there's no way I'm turning that into more. Like, it's going the opposite way. So it's like you want that when you're young, but you can't be a good steward of it.
So you guys moved out here. You met each other at a bar. You guys were like negative, a few $1,000s combined net worth.
But you didn't know at the time.
No.
No.
So then what happened?
You can't play that hand on day one.
She had the same kind of corporate job the whole time, and I had one, I guess, like real job, if you ever will call it. And long story short, I'm like, this isn't for me. Like, I just can't do this. And so I quit with no clients and no money, which if anybody listening, don't start a business that way. But I just decided.
Don't do it right when you move in with your girlfriend and tell them that you're going to do bad.
But it's like, I figured like if I fail and it doesn't happen, I can always go back to like work at Enterprise or go do whatever. Long story short, I found a space like in North Scottsdale here, which is super nice. But it was not ideal and it was not perfect. I did fitness, and this is real, in a warehouse in Scottsdale for 7.5 years with no air conditioning. It's not fun and it was not ideal. And I figured if I'm going to do this and make it a career, one, I have to build multiple revenue streams around this. So I take the money, from what I'm good at, training people, invest it into our online platforms. And her and I would talk all the time. And this is a hard sell to your wife or, going to be your wife. Like, hey, we're not going to buy the fanciest house. Like, we're going to save money to buy a warehouse that we can do fitness in, which is, bless her heart, like she went along with it.
Very exciting.
Yeah. But now it pays off. But it was like, we did these necessary things that most people wouldn't do, like live in a house way less than we could afford, drive old crappy cars for long periods of time, because I knew, I'm like, if we can make like 2 or 3 of these decisions in our 20s and 30s, the next, God willing, 30, 40, 50, 60 years are going to be a lot different. But it's a patience game, and it's like being able to see it
in the future, the long-term benefits. And for some reason, we were able to understand that at 20, I guess I was a 25.
You were doing courses and you started the podcast and all that stuff way before most anybody. So you were way ahead of the curve. What did you see?
Like for me, the two things, one, like we could see it maybe earlier and younger because we get to work with all these people. And so we have a great community of people. Like you guys come in and there's so many people, and I could hear the stories. Like, 7 to 8, like I buy my first place, but I don't have any real money. So like, what am I going to lose, $5,000? Like, it's not a big deal. But I would sit across from guys who are like, yeah, I lost 400,000, I lost $1 million. And at the time I'm like, how are you even breathing? Like, how can you come back from that? So you hear enough and you're like, okay, here's what I don't want to do. And like, here's what we can do. And in terms of the internet, like just jumping on it early, we just look at people's behavior patterns. And if my thesis is the internet is a one-way street, or technology in general, we're not going backwards. As much as like the good old days were good. Like people live on these phones. And I'm like, if that's where they are, I'm like, and if we can help 200 people in Scottsdale, shoot, we can maybe help 10,000 people all over the world. Well, especially like when you don't have any money when you start. And we are like from the pre-internet days. So in fitness, I'm old. Like that's just how it works now. So I remember going around like to the air park, handing out my flyers to businesses. And I promise when I walked out the door, they threw them in the trash. Like we never got traffic from that. You're going to cold businesses. It's terrible. And you do about 5 or 6 in a day before you're so discouraged you want to quit. And I'm like, this can't be it, dude. I go, but I can get on this thing and talk to 600 people in 10 seconds. And that just seemed like a better fit for like what we were doing.
And I think when we first created the first online coaching program that you could sell on the internet, and when we started seeing people from all these different countries start to buy it, we were like, wow, we're onto something here.
Jeremy Scott Fitness, by the way, is kind of the handle for everything, right?
Yeah.
You obviously moved into different verticals. Can you talk about, how you did that? Because I think that's ultimately one of the most important things if, because something can go away pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the opposite of what most people think. Like, hey, if I work, at least how like my parents grew up, I work at this place for 40 years, I retire, it's a stable paycheck. And like my grandpa used to say, like, get a job with good benefits. And I'm like, here I am, obviously. But the way I look at it is like, I'd have to get fired today by like 5,000 people in companies at once to have $0, where somebody who's a W-2 is just one and done. So for us, I was like, well, if we have multiple pockets, whether it's like in-person training, digital training, if it's nutrition, if it's our sponsorships, if it's supplementation, if it's owning the building, renting from ourselves, all these things, it just makes life easier to me, even though it's like a lot more to manage. And the goal is always just kind of stack things that naturally fit to what we're going to do. And so for us, it's like, obviously if we're like in health and fitness, I'm like, we do have, and again, if I'm like the brand, I guess, like the clothes that I wear, the things that we do all sponsor kind of our lifestyle. So it was like a easy fit, I guess, for the most part, but we just built those time and time again. The biggest one was trying to own the space that we're in, because I just knew over time, I'm going to get tired at some point and not want to do this at the same clip. And the base rents here are not going down.
Yeah.
And I lived through that for 7 years of them just going up and up and up. And at some point I'm like, dude, this is going to be not sustainable in the way that I want to do it. But if I can own the place and just pay for it through fitness and have it appreciate, I'm like, I'll have the opportunity to just be a landlord or just keep doing this forever, basically for free. And then everything is just profit.
I remember, Jeremy, you telling me one time, you're like, I knew I had to buy a building because I was going to be priced out of Scottsdale. Like I was going to be able to afford to have like a box gym in Scottsdale.
So basically like we were in a play like leasing it forever, and it was coming up like within like a year or so. And this is what I guess I would tell anybody to do. And not when you buy your personal residence, I'm like, do what you want. But if you're going to buy something or lease something, I guess, if you will, look at the term. So it's 5 years is all they were going to do, because no one was going to flex and do 3. So by the end of 5 years, I would have been paying hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in rent. And then you start to step back and look at it. I'm like, well, could I just buy my own, for less than that or the same price? And that's when we started looking around and be like, okay, actually it makes more fiscal sense, because like we have the cash.
And for me, it was understanding like this is a long-term real estate investment. It will give us options later on. And when he does retire, with being in person at the gym, we can lease it out or sell it at some point. And so it was like understanding that years ago to set us up for.
Yeah, because and now like there's so many benefits to that too. Like, and I didn't know this either. Like I remember being on the phone with like our CPA and my financial advisor, and he's like, okay, you're going to create these other LLCs. The building is going to be owned in this one. You're going to rent from yourself. And he's explaining all these things. And I go, this sounds illegal to me, but it's really, because like I had no idea, like that's really how it is. And I go, the benefits that come from that, like having a pass-through business and the money that you make, it really does kind of change the scope of your financial life. Not to mention the fact of like, you're basically paying yourself to be in the building as opposed to paying some other guy $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 a year. It makes a huge difference.